From Shafik East Africa Institute of Learning. So let us look at briefly about the oral method of preaching the gospel. The oral method of preaching the gospel is the time when the gospel has preached you from door to door. People used to move from an area, they come to your door, they knock, they preach, and then they go. Kerygma, it is the message of God or gospel about Jesus that was preached orally from one house to another. However, there were a lot of challenges that the early church faced. So the early church, when we talk about the early church, we talk about the apostles. They faced a number of problems, and today I want us to look at the problems that they faced during their time of service, or during their apostolic period, or during their time in the office. Up here we have the effectiveness of the oral preaching, the kerygma. The effectiveness of the oral method refers to how advantageous and disadvantageous the method was. The method was therefore both positive and negative. It affected the people positively and negatively. That's when the gospel was preached using the mouth. Remember, by that time I said we did not have writing materials. We did not have a specific language. We did not have clear information. The apostles were still even bright, their brain was still fresh, so they didn't see the advantage of writing the gospel. But time came and they sat down and they started what we call the canonicity, writing the gospel down for the future generation. And time came when the apostles, some of them began to die, and therefore they had to meet and sit and discuss on which books should they take, which information should they write, among others. So what is the advantages of the oral preaching method of preaching the gospel orally using the mouth? One, it was quick and faster. It was a quick and faster method, because you could speak something here and then another person extend it to another, then even another person also extends the thing. It's like when you say something in public, it is easy for that thing to be amplified. So the oral method was a faster method, because it was always easy for the people to amplify to the rest of the people. So this, at the end of the day, helped the church expand at a higher speed. Two, it involved the performance of miracles. The apostles got time of doing what we call physical performance. They could perform miracles in public physically because they were always with the people. Again, it helped them to answer critical questions that were posed by the new believers or the new followers or the wishing, the population that was willing to change, that wished to change and join Christianity. Still, it led to easy expansion of the church numerically or in number. The church expanded at a larger to a larger extent, because people could just speak. Some people found it easier to listen than reading, so this made the church expand at a higher speed. It was cheap and even free, because it did not involve any expenses. There was no need of money to preach. There was no need of money for someone to go and preach to another person. Why? It was a whole method that just required talking, speaking, using your lips, using your mouth, using your tongue to speak the people and then convince them, and that's all. So it was the cheapest method. It was easy to convince the audience. You know, when you speak with the use of the mouth, like for example, people who do marketeers, someone can convince you and makes you buy something which has not been in your plan. But because the person has used the mouth to speak, then it is easy for that person to convince you. So it was very easy to convince people to join Christianity. After all, it was the use of the mouth. That's how advantageous was the oral method. It led to the easy understanding of the news, because it encouraged the question and answer system. People had to question the apostles, and then apostles had to answer the questions posed by the people. At least this time round, it was easy for people to get answers. The method benefited different categories of people, like the blind, those who cannot see but they can at least hear something, the illiterate, those that could not read. Then we have the over-aged people, the old people who could not again see or read anything, but the old method could favor them. However, it could not favor the deaf. It only favored the blind who cannot see, the over-aged people, the illiterate people who could not read and understand, or even going ahead to interpret what is written. The method still saved time, because it was not consuming a lot of time for someone to come at your door, preaches to you, and goes to another. It consumed less time. Apostles could use less time in an area addressing people, then actually answering their questions, so it did not consume a lot of time for them. The method encouraged sharing. This is because the apostles could share material property with the poor and the needy they found. So sharing still was also an advantage that was from this method, that at least the apostles could move from door to door. They shared the little they had with the poor or with the needy. At least they ended up sharing at the end of the day, promoting Christianity or joining Christianity. Again, the method encouraged strong fellowship and unity in the society, because people were always together, we are always in one place, gathering, making them ready to live as one family. So there was unity promoted by this method. Another one, it involved direct counseling, guidance among the Israelites. People could directly go for counseling. They used one stone to hit two birds. They could preach at the same time counseling people who were around. It involved the baptism. Those who believed and were ready to accept Christianity, they welcomed the baptism, they were baptized, and at the end of the day, they also became leaders in the line of Christ. It was dangerous. It was advantageous in the sense that it was a way to follow Jesus, for example, because he also preached on orally. Jesus himself did not write the gospel down, no, but he instead used this oral method. He could move from the Gentile community, goes to the Jewish community, from the Jewish community to the Gentile community, preaching using his mouth. That is what we call oral method. It was easy for follow-ups, and hence minimizing backsliding. That is to say, preachers would know different people they preached to, and in the end make a follow-up of what they have preached. And at the end of the day, the gospel moved beyond the boundaries of France. So receiving spiritual gifts like speaking in tongues, because the preachers would lay hands differently on the converts. Those who had converted into Christianity, time came and the apostles laid their hands on their heads, making them, or baptizing them, blessing them, making them feel home. Then we go on the disadvantages of this method, the demerits of the kerygma, or demerits of the oral method. It was time consuming. It was tiresome. Why? Someone had to move from door to door, from one area to another, footing. By then we didn't have cars. So it was tiresome to preach from one area to another. You travel, you foot from here to Kajasi, from Kajasi, you go to Seguku, from Seguku, you go to Namlanda. By the time you come back, you're ready, tired, or exhausted. So it was time consuming. It left no room for future reference, and so it could easily be forgotten. The oral method that was used, the kerygma, it was easy for someone to forget it. It was easy for the people to forget what has been taught to them. Reason being, it was not written for the future generation to do what we call revision. There was no room for revision. It did not favor some categories of people like the deaf. Remember, this is a method that caused someone to use the lips, the mouth, the tongue to speak. So a deaf who cannot hear was not favored. It exposed the preachers to direct insults, persecution, abuse, among others. So since people were preaching in public, they were captured, they were persecuted, they were flogged, many of them were killed. Reason for having preached the gospel about Jesus. Again, there was language barrier. Language barrier was also observed, whereby people who could not hear this language were left out. People who could not, for example, speak English. If you go in our village there and you start speaking English, some people will just look at you because some of them cannot understand English. So language barrier. There was another thing, it would lead to death of some creature. For example, we have what we call Stephen. Some creatures, there was, let me first put some corrections here. There was death of some creatures. For example, Stephen was stoned directly to death. That issue, they had that culture of stoning people to death. They tie you somewhere, when they get you, then they stone you to death. It gave a chance to false preachers because everyone was free to preach, and again the preachers would also come in altogether. It would lead to destruction of the original message. It would be it will be repeated and hence boring at times. At times this kind of preaching was boring because they could repeat and repeat what they said in Seguku, they repeat what they said in Jinja, they repeat what they said in home. At the end of the day, it ended up boring the listeners. So with those few points, I beg to submit, but you go and deeply read more about the advantages and disadvantages of the oral method of preaching or the kerygma. Have a good day.